Hello and welcome back in everybody, Levi here, and today I'm going to be talking about a new commander out of Aether Drift, possibly my favorite one that's come out so far. Unfortunately, I have a pretty similar deck to this one, so I won't be putting this together in paper. It's probably going to be pretty popular, but I don't really care. This looks like a really fun one to talk about. It's Captain Howler Sea Scourge, 2 a blue and a red for a 5/4 Shark Pirate with ward, pay 2 mana and 2 life, so that's a pretty steep ward. Whenever you discard one or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn for each card discarded this way. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, you draw a card. So I guess right off the bat, the first thing to note is that it does say target creature. So in any event, if you had some instant speed discard, you could give this to an opponent that is attacking one of your other opponents. After it's declared not blocked, you can cast like an instant speed wheel, discarding 5 cards, giving it +10/+0, and hopefully you can knock out one of your other opponents. So I guess you can even go like a goad theme with this deck, but the theme I went with is playing a lot of evasive creatures, then discarding a bunch of cards to either cycling, to wheels, to looting, things like that, and then hopefully being able to do a ton of damage with our unblockable creatures. And that's going to be the first category I'm talking about here. I'll go over some of the evasive creatures, some of the more notable ones anyway. Cunning Survivor up first. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human warrior. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, Cunning Survivor gets +1/+0 until end of turn and can't be blocked. So this one is kind of like a pseudo backup. If you can't get your commander out, say it's died 3 or 4 times, if you can't get him out, you can at least pump this guy +1/+0 for each card you discarded. So it's kind of like a little backup. Ghostly Pilferer up next. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Spirit Rogue. Whenever Ghostly Pilferer becomes untapped, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. Probably not going to be using that too much because we have a lot of card draw in this deck, but whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, you draw a card, and you can discard a card as an activated ability to give it unblockable until end of turn. So the main reason I'm talking about this one is it has that discard a card for no tap or mana cost, so you can do that at instant speed. You can discard your entire hand if you want, and it doesn't cost anything. So if you really need to trigger your commander's ability, pumping up one of your creatures, Ghostly Pilferer is a really good way to do that. Another cool one, Mercurial Spelldancer. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Phyrexian Rogue. Says this creature can't be blocked, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Mercurial Spelldancer, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell, choose new targets for the copies. So we can cast a couple non-creature spells and then remove the 2 oil counters to, copy your Windfall or whatever it is, discarding 14 cards, whatever you're going to discard, giving a creature, +28/+0, something like that. So it can get out of hand pretty quickly, especially if we're copying some of our cool instant or sorceries. Somewhat new one out of Duskmourn, Silent Hall Creeper. Love this card. 1 and a blue for a 1/1 enchantment creature horror. It can't be blocked, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose one that hasn't been chosen. You either put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, draw a card, or it becomes a copy of another target creature you control. So just good extra value. 2 mana is pretty much the going rate for unblockable creatures. There are a few 1 mana ones, but to get a little bit of extra value off of those 2 mana unblockable creatures, it's just all upside there. That's gonna be it for the notable unblockable creatures. Now we'll go into the ways that we can discard cards. One of the best wheels, obviously, Tolarian Winds. 1 in the blue, it's an instant. This is the reason it's so good. Discard your hand, then draw that many cards. So this is the classic wheel. It's not the red one that you draw like an extra card or whatever, but having 2 mana instant speed, wheel your hand away. It's insanely strong to be able to wait until that last moment before you decide like which creature you're going to be buffing up. A card I throw into pretty much every deck with red that I can, Tectonic Reformation. 1 and a red for an enchantment. Each land card in your hand has cycling red. This also can be cycled for 2. So, later in the game, you're still like mana screwed or something like that, and you're never going to use the cycling ability. You could cycle this itself and just get the card draw off of that, but having all of your lands in your hand have cycling just really helps out your commander's strategy, being able to discard whenever you need to. Next, got a brand new card out of Aether Drift. This card's absolutely insane. I'm definitely going to be building this into some decks. Ret Tomb Mystic. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Zombie Bird Wizard with flying. Each creature card in your hand has cycling. 1 and a blue. This card is really unique and interesting. I've been trying to build some form of cycling deck. Having this in the deck really helps out the strategy. You can only play certain cards that have cycling, and not all of them are really good, so being able to give any creature in your hand cycling is really cool. Next up, Pyretic Charge. 4 and a red for a sorcery. Discard your hand, then draw 4 cards. For each card discarded this way, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Also has plot 3 and a red, so if you want to just leave that in exile, cast it later for free, could be a really beneficial strategy. But similar to that Cunning Survivor, this is kind of like a little backup for our commander if he happens to not be on board. This is another way to pump our creatures from discarding. And one of my favorite cards that I have in my Francisco deck, Path of the Pyromancer. 4 and a red for a sorcery. Discard all the cards in your hand, add red for each card discarded this way, then draw that many cards +1. Just goes into every red discard deck, and this one is no exception. And then I found a card that I've never even seen before I started researching this deck, Forgotten Creation. 3 and a blue for a 3/3 zombie horror with Skulk. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may discard all the cards in your hand. If you do, draw that many cards. cards. This is actually insane. It's just a repeatable way every turn to be able to discard your hand and draw that many. It does give a little bit of an advantage to your opponents because you're doing it on your upkeep, so it's a little more telegraphed as opposed to like the instant speed ones, but I still think it's definitely worth it in the deck. Only for 4 mana, really good card. Last up, Change of Fortune, 3 and a red for a sorcery. Discard your hand, then draw a card for each card you've discarded this turn. So like I was talking about with like the plot from Piratic Charge earlier, you'd probably want to plot that and then save it for when you have your Change of Fortune. After you discarded a bunch of cards, refill your hand and then some. This card's absolutely wild. I've cast the Path of the Pyromancer before and then into Change of Fortune. Really, really good card there. Next up, some of the notable looters in the deck. I have Evie Fry up first. I believe that's how you say it. Out of Assassin's Creed, 1 in a blue for a 2/1 human assassin, partner with Jacob Fry, so we're not going to worry about that because I'm pretty sure he's in black. Pay 1, tap, draw a card, then discard a card, and when you discard a creature card this way, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So this one's pulling double duty for us. It's looting, and it's also giving a creature unblockable, so if we wanted to get in for combat damage with our commander or something like that, one of our creatures that doesn't have unblockable, this is a cool way to do so. Mary Reed and Anne Bonny also out of Assassin's Creed, 1 blue and a red for a 3/3 human assassin pirate with haste. Tap, draw a card, discard a card, so it has the looting ability, and it also has a payoff for discarding. Whenever you discard an island, pirate, or vehicle card, create a tapped treasure token. Just great value if you happen to be discarding your islands a little bit later in the game because we don't really have pirates or vehicles, so it's possible we get some extra treasures out of this card. Next up, Mishra, Excavation Prodigy, 2 and a red for a 2/1 human artificer with haste. Pay 1, tap, discard a card, then draw a card, so this one's rummaging, so a little bit less good than looting, but the other ability definitely makes up for it. Whenever you discard 1 or more artifact cards, add red. This ability triggers only once each turn, so we don't have too many artifacts, but we do have like mana rocks, things like that, stuff that we could pitch a little bit later in order to get a little bit extra mana. Last up, the utility category, just a bunch of cards that don't really fit into the other categories but really help propel our deck forward. First up, I got Fists of Flame, 1 and a red for a instant. Draw a card. Until on a turn, target creature gets trample and +1/+0 for each card you've drawn this turn, so this is kind of like a little reverse to our commander. I'd probably save this for that little alpha strike. Once we've wheeled with, say, something like Path of the Pyromancer, Change of Fortune, one of those cards, you can cast this at instant speed at the last minute to give one of your creatures, you know, +5, +6, +7, however much, and it also gives trample. The trample's not as relevant in this deck because we have so many unblockable creatures, but still really good instant speed interaction. The next one is another one of those payoffs for discarding. Glint-horn Buccaneer, 1 red for a Minotaur Pirate, 2/4 with haste. Whenever you discard a card, Glint-horn Buccaneer deals 1 damage to each opponent. You can also pay 1 and a red to discard a card and then draw a card, but activate only if he's attacking, so this one we won't be using as much unless we give it unblockable with our Evie Fry or something like that. It's mainly there for the ping damage when we discard cards, just another little alt win con. I also threw some fling effects into the deck just in case we can't get in for combat damage. We can pump up one of our creatures and then just yeet it at one of our opponents, deal the damage that way. Kazul's Fury, 2 and a red for an instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sack a creature, and then Kazul's Fury deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. Most of the time, we're obviously going to be throwing that at our opponent's faces, but suppose you could throw it at a creature if you really need to get one off the board. And on the backside, it comes in tapped, but it adds red. Another good payoff here, Psychosis Crawler, 5 mana, star Phyrexian Horror. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand, and whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So again, just another way to close out the game if we can't get in for combat damage. And last up, definitely, this is for sure my favorite card out of Aether Drift, at least so far, Monument to Endurance, 3 mana artifact. Whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, draw a card, create a treasure, or each opponent loses 3 life. This actually is insanely broken. I'm sure this card is going to be expensive. I want like 3 copies already for some decks I already have. This is definitely going in my Francisco deck. Any deck that is cycling, discarding, anything like that, looting, you're definitely going to want to throw this in there. You get extra card draw ramp and damage to your opponents. I'm so glad they printed this card. Is it a little too strong? Possibly, but it's going in this deck regardless because it is really, really good. I don't know. This could end up being like a $20 card, and I usually don't recommend those on my videos, but it's before the set comes out, so we don't know actually how much it is, but definitely worth a slot. And that is it for my Captain Howler Sea Scourge deck. This is probably the direction that most people are going to go with it. Like I said, you could do like a goad route, discarding at instant speed, maybe to cycling, something like that, giving your opponent's creatures a little buff after they have to swing at your other opponents. That doesn't really seem like the best strategy to me. I like the unblockable strategy and then just doing a bunch of looting and wheels and stuff like that. But if you want to check out the full deck list, it is down in the description. Also in the description, I have a link to my Patreon. If anyone feels like supporting the channel, I'd really appreciate it. I have a little intro video over there if you want to go check it out. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, take care.